Welcome back, everyone. Hope y'all all having a great day. A lot has been going on, as you guys have been seeing. The world is watching the Middle East going crazy.
الآن استهدافات جديدة الآن.
And yeah, I just hope everything is gonna be all right, because I'm looking at the news and there's a lot of other nations joining in, and this is not a good sign. So overall, let's just pray for the best. Let's not always assume the worst, and let's just not forget that our let's not forget that our prayers can go a long way. And I know sometimes we can't be there physically, but yeah, just pray for Palestine. Pray for the innocent people being killed. I don't want to say that I hate Israel, because I had a lot of messages after my podcast I posted yesterday. Some people were like, they were like, give me good criticism. They were like, try not to show that you're picking a side.
You got to pick a side.
Because I don't want to be seen as someone who chooses one part of humanity and ignores the other part of humanity. Like I said, there's casualties on both sides. It's just very overwhelming. All right, so again, thank you guys so much for clicking on this video.
Thank you.
Today, I am going to talk about the most disturbing history that Florida tried to erase. So some of y'all saying like, what? Florida? What are we talking about? So yeah, it's just crazy how a lot of history just gets put under the rug, All right, let's get to it. So according to an urban legend, black kids were used as alligator bait in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So no lie, I thought this was a joke.
You think I'm kidding? It's not a joke.
I thought this was a lie. Like, what? African American kids used as alligator bait? And I'm like, alligators, crocodiles, ancient predators, dinosaurs, right? So yeah, I had to dive into this documentary. I'm not gonna lie, I've seen this documentary about 3 times when I was younger, so it's a pretty old documentary. But like, as I got older and I started like reminiscing about like the history, this is one of the first videos that popped in my head, and I was like, I have to cover this in my podcast. So let's move on. So I just want to say that this is gonna be very graphic. I'm not able to show certain things, of course, due to YouTube guidelines, but I'm gonna try just to show just a visual, what was going on back then. So let's move on. So I added the bullet point that we were all aware of the pervasive racism in the United States. I was like, however, I'm just going to discuss a different type of racism, or a different type of harsh reality. And again, I said this is not meant to be depressing or upsetting, but rather to help us comprehend how brutal and evil our history was. So in this documentary, the author states a quote by Martin Luther King.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper.
The quote is as follows: "We are not makers of history. We are made by history." So yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? Like, with what's going on right now. Like, I don't like to keep bringing up the whole Palestine and Israel thing, but this will, affect our future. It's going to affect the future of the Middle East. And yeah, I'm not trying to get too political, but I just find it very important that like what's going on right now as we speak, it's interesting. Sorry, moving on. So we all know about the University of Florida, like the football team, and they do that little chant, like the alligator, bite and whatnot. So yeah, believe it or not, that alligator chant has racist origins I think it was called the Alligator Bait chant. So yeah, so it was a hand motion that they would make that would resemble an alligator biting, and they would do that in their football teams, but not a lot of them knew the origins of that chant. So let's go on to see. So the Florida University prohibited the band and athletes from using the alligator bait chant and other symbols that have ties to the school's troubled past back in 2020. So let's go back in 1996, after the Florida college football team won against their rivals. Lawrence Wright stated after their win,
"If you ain't a gator,
You must be gator bait.
which I think was the running back at the time. If you ain't a gator, you must be gator bait. So the sentence is not racist, but the phrase is. So the term gator bait refers to legends about black children being used as gator bait to lure in alligators and crocodiles. So you're gonna be like, what? Right? So in the early 1900s, this was reported in numerous publications, and there are records that verify it. So let's say gator hunting was a sizable industry and highly profitable trade in the 1800s and 1900s. These animal skins were used to create high demand items like shoes, bags, and belts, like everything that we see today. Like a lot of that comes from these animals, especially alligator and crocodile. I heard that was like the most expensive stuff you can get, but also the hardest things to acquire, like killing an alligator. Imagine trying to kill an alligator in 1900s. Crazy, right? Nowadays we got like AR-15s, we got grenades, we could tear up a whole swamp, but now, like back then, it was just really difficult. So this land was viewed as an unlimited fortune by white settlers. The resources of the land were depleted by these settlers through mining, agriculture, and wildlife hunting. It is significant to note that while it was common to kill crocodiles and alligators for sport, but back then they had to start killing them for monetary value because the whole supply and demand. Everybody wants to make money. So in the early 1900s, crocodile and alligator skins were among the most expensive and popular exotic leathers. Yeah, imagine if you was wearing alligator skin, you was the man or the woman. if you was wearing alligator skin, like everybody knew like the type of class you belonged to and whatnot. So I said, however, the only way to get these skins was to hunt these enormous monsters. So, and because there was a greater demand for the material, wealthy people were willing to pay very high prices for it. So I ain't gonna lie, if I was in the 1900s and I'm broke and I got a family to feed and they tell me, hey, you go kill a crocodile and we'll feed your family, we'll give you all this money, I'm coming back home with no arms. Like, I'm just saying, like, just imagine how desperate people were back then. Like, they had to, like, killing an alligator, that meant like, oh wow, if I'm able to kill an alligator, I'm gonna bring back home a bag of money, So therefore, a growing number of people were eager to accept the offer and start hunting these predators for wealth and riches. So it's crucial to be aware of or emphasize the fact that back then in the 19th century, people used rifles, muskets, and shotguns. And I'm not talking about shotguns that we see today, like the pump shotguns. And no, these are like the old school rifles, like bullets that barely did any damage. Probably would have to take like a whole lot of people to shoot at one alligator at the same time to kill one. So let's see. So like again, my next bullet point was that it was like 19th century technology. That was extremely slow and like nothing compared to what we have today. So most of the time you had to load the gunpowder into the muzzle before you can aim and fire. Many of these individuals lacked military training, which reduced their shooting speed to 2 shots per minute. So imagine an alligator coming at you and you shoot one bullet, you probably miss, and you gotta wait, you gotta do the whole process, and by then you're already in the mouth of the alligator. So yeah, it's pretty scary. Even with faster loading weapons like the mini ball, which is a hollow base bullet, gators were still unbeatable. Like very small bullets, and alligators, dinosaurs, they got the armored skin, So in the process of attempting to capture these enormous monsters, white hunters frequently lost an arm, a leg, and even sometimes their lives. So this is where it gets dark. So I was like, they made the decision to use bait to make it easier for them to catch gators and kill them by luring them in out of their swamps. Because in the documentary, I think they were just like literally going on the boat and going in the water and like trying to kill crocodiles that way, but you're literally playing in their playground. So they had to find a way to make it easier for them to exterminate these predators. So, but next bullet point was that this was no ordinary bait. So, small black children, according to some, were frequently used as bait to capture these apex predators. It's possible that this occurred in Louisiana, Florida, or any other southern state. So, they don't know exactly where, but they know it was in the South, and they had some proof that it was in Louisiana. White men would come to steal the babies sometimes in broad daylight from their mothers, like when they weren't around, and the children would be taken to the swamp, placed in pens, or tied to a rope and left next to an alligator den. And the alligators would emerge and start searching for their prey in a matter of minutes. There's an old Florida postcard that showed like this horrible sight of white people using children as alligator bait. So in the American South, they had a high prevalence of such like pervasive racism. They used to send like cards to each other with like black people being hung, and that's how they used to say hello to each other. And I'm not like kidding. I'm not just saying this to spark outrage. But if you guys are aware of our history, it was different back then. It was very different, especially during the Jim Crow movement or the Jim Crow era. And if some people don't know what the Jim Crow era was, that was when they was segregating blacks and whites. You know, only blacks can go to this school, only whites go to this school, only water for whites, water for blacks, etc., etc. Let's see. So, additionally, like this whole alligator bait brought a lot of visitors. Like people literally came to Louisiana, Florida, like I don't know, anywhere else in the South just to see like alligator bait, like children being used as alligator bait. During the Jim Crow era, African Americans lived a harsh and terrible life due to discrimination and brutality, which I just talked about earlier. Atrocities committed against African Americans at the time were numerous and unfortunately normal. And according to some reports, it really did happen that black kids were used as alligator bait. In the South, this practice was very widespread. How could anyone ever consider like just going to an African American family during that time and wait until the mother's not looking and just grab the children, right, with all your people and go into the swamp and tie them and like alligators, guys, alligators, crocodiles. So because black people were viewed as subhuman, worthless, savage, atrocities like these were considered normal by the deformed and deranged human mind. So because they were able to dehumanize African Americans and was able to like brainwash the world to seeing African Americans as subhuman, this was normal. This was okay. Like using children as alligator bait was just a normal day life in America, you know? But it wasn't normal to African Americans during that time. And I also put bullet point. It was said in the documentary that in those days, the lives of animals were valued more highly than those of African Americans. And experts discovered a few news articles from the 19th and 20th centuries that provided proof of this devastating behavior. The children who were used as bait were probably not even infants because they were taught to run, to sit, to make noises just at the right moment. So in the documentary, it was said that they taught the children when to sit and like when to scream to make the alligators come in, and who knows if they even knew what was going on. Like they were just kidnapped and just told to, hey, scream and jump and whatnot, and they probably like, okay, I'll do whatever you guys want, I just want to go back home. And then a couple of seconds later, alligators will start bursting out of their hiding places by the numbers, because back then there was a lot of alligators. And there are till today, and they're like, you know, protected by laws and stuff. So basically when the alligators would burst out of its hiding places and start like chomping on these children, that's when the hunters would start shooting the alligators while they're like literally eating the children. So in an article from Washington Times from 1908, the word pickaninny was referred to as a black child. So this was a stereotype used to demean black children. White people used the term when they wanted to talk about something almost inhuman, unkept, and filthy. It was something dispensable. So a pickaninny basically means a black child who's worthless, doesn't have any value, dispensable, do whatever you want with it. Sorry if I'm saying this and it's like triggering anything, but yeah. So this was a common depiction, even in popular media. So this article talks about a zookeeper sending 2 black children into like this area with more than 25 alligators and crocodiles. The hungry reptiles started chasing the children. And this was a tactic they used to lead the reptiles back into their tank so that tourists could view the animals in the summer. But there's also more. There was an article from Richmond Times Dispatch issued in 1919. And there was also a mini story titled Seen on the Side by Henry Edward Warner that goes, "We understand the Florida authorities are going to prohibit the use of live pickaninnies as alligator bait. They say they've got to do something to check that rapid disappearance of alligator through indigestion." This showed the white community was not really happy about Florida's authorities' decision to ban African American children as gator bait. So they were really upset that they couldn't use black children anymore as gator bait. Then it goes on to mock these children as if it was their fault for the sudden disappearance of alligators because they supposedly ate the pickaninnies and had digestive problems as a result. And there was also another article from St. Louis Republic published in 1902. This one described all the floats featured in the veiled prophet parade of the city. So this one described like all these floats, like these, just like those big balloon things that they would do on those festivals. So I don't know how to describe it, to be honest. Basically, it was like a parade that they did in the city, and they said that this organization was a secret society. Established by a former Confederate soldier. So this parade that he organized was to depict the history of the Louisiana Purchase. So the float number 15 was titled Plantation Life in Louisiana, which showcased a scene where a massive alligator was depicted devouring a chubby African American child. So articles were not the only forms of content that like people were able to like see this imagery. There were also like postcards, which I talked about earlier, branding, posters, and memorabilia, I think that's how you say it, all providing the same exact thing. So again, there was postcards showing African Americans as alligator bait in the United States. These early postcards were the text messages during the time. They were cheap and practical to make and could reach a wide range of audience. And also at that time, they were meant to be mailed as commercial ads. So many of these postcards were printed with small designs or sketches called vignettes. Vignettes? I think that's how you say it. They had a message on the side, and at first the cards were made just in black and white. But in time, they became increasingly available in color. So the many surviving examples of such postcards tell a horrendous story. So they were meant to address the people willing to use the lives of black children to collect a prized commodity. Again, alligator skin or crocodile skin. The white hunters were using human blood and flesh to lure monstrous crocodiles and alligators. I just find it interesting. Instead of using animal blood, animal flesh to lure in alligators, they're just like, let's just use people. Like, it's just so crazy to me. To prepare for the activity, it is said that some white settlers kidnapped black children, tied them to a rope, and dropped them in the swamps. Others would get groups of children and order them to stay over the alligator swamp near the open mouths of hungry gators. And these kids were fed to the predators whole. So this is a documented event that can also be seen in old artifacts as well, such as product packaging and knickknacks. I think knickknacks were like just some type of like memorabilia, like things that you can buy. I think they were like pictures of African American children inside the mouths of alligators, and people would buy that and take them home and show their friends and families. I guess that was like the cool thing to do back then. So these were like sold ornaments that were sold in hundreds and thousands in areas where gator baits were deemed as a tourist attraction. At that time, the shelves and stores were covered with these decorative objects. These antiques come in bold colors and highly intricate designs that don't shy away from America's brutal past. So I just find it so funny, like, I just can't imagine me being in 1917 and going to a store. I'm like, oh my god, I want to buy this African American child in the mouth of an alligator. Like, oh my god, this is so cool. Like, if anything, that would make me embarrassed of the nation that I live in, But like I said, times are just different. Like, minds were, I guess we're still evolving. But overall, like, I'm kind of happy how far we've came. Like, I'm happy that's not still being done today, although there are still a lot of dark things being done that we just don't know what's going on. But like, there's always people suffering. Like, there's always things going on. But it's just crazy. Back then, this was like done at the zoos and right in front of your eyes. It's just crazy. Let's see. And many of these trinkets were displayed in the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Imagery. So yeah, even in the documentary, they show some very interesting artifacts. And pretty much my last bullet point was that the rest of the documentary shows more and more articles of proof of this alligator bait stuff. Like, I didn't want to go too deep into it because the whole documentary was like 30 more minutes of just more references, more examples of children being used as alligator bait. And the reason why I brought up this topic, because like I brought up in my podcast yesterday when I brought up Palestine versus Israel. Like, I took a lot of AFRAM classes. Like, AFRAM is basically like African American racism in America. And not only for just African Americans, it was just in that class I was just learning discrimination from all races, Like, there's just so much like, again, history that is always being forgotten. If not forgotten, like, we know that this stuff happened, or some of us know this stuff happened, but I just feel like we just end up forgetting. So I feel like, again, awareness.
Please examine your outrageous behavior through a lens of newfound self-awareness.
Like, bringing in awareness is like my number one key about with this whole YouTube channel and this podcast. I just don't want to YouTube like shut it, because YouTube can be very like sensitive when it comes to certain topics.
Are we too sensitive?
I haven't read all the guidelines, but I just know that there are certain things we're able to say and there's certain things we're not able to say. So overall, I just hope you guys enjoyed this video. I just feel like I had to cover this. I've been wanting to cover this for the past 2 weeks, but I'm like, I actually wanted to cover this with Brandon, who was on my podcast about 2 days ago. I was like, hey Brandon, how would you like to talk about alligator bait? He looked at me like weird. He was like, I think you should cover that by yourself. And I was like, all right, say less. But yeah, all right, you guys. Thank you guys so much. It was a pretty short podcast today. I'm gonna try to get something exciting on my next podcast. I'm trying to bring a number of people, so hopefully my next podcast is gonna be like 6 or 7 people. Hopefully, not in here because it'll be too tiny. But yeah, hopefully I'll get that as soon as possible. But thank you guys so much for supporting me and clicking on my videos and watching them. And I hope that every single one of you guys can have a platform of some sort where you're able to just display yourself. Have a good one, everybody. If y'all need anything, let me know. Like and subscribe and comment, all that good stuff. Farewell.
We've learned to fly the air like birds. We've learned to swim the seas like fish. And yet we haven't learned to walk the earth as brothers and sisters.